What are your kind of earliest memories of drawing? Was it sort of redrawing things from books and comics that you'd seen?
No, it was, I don't know, I suppose it must be 3 or 4 years old because I was not a very tranquil boy. So it looked like the teacher, to keep me tranquil, they give me a piece of paper and pencils. So I was in a corner just drawing all the time. That way they can keep me abide, in control.
And what kind of things did you draw?
Something that I do for many years when I was bored in class. It was like, I don't know, for example, I draw a castle and then I start drawing very little figures of people fighting and things like that. Who says it can be a castle or it can be a ship, pirate ship. Maybe in the end it was something like 100 little figures of people fighting. That was a way that when I was bored in class when I was doing.
The comic is a cheap option. Well, at least it was originally a cheap option to the films. I remember when I was a kid, maybe 10 years old, 12 years old, we just used to hire comics in a magazine, and we were sitting in chairs or in the floor or something like that, yeah, reading comics that we hired and interchanging each other. And it was it was the equivalent of the cinema, more or less.
So what did you read when you were a child, Carlos? What sort of comics did you like to read?
I think it was a part of the Spanish ones, some adventures, comics, and so on. I read also a lot of Rick Kirby, Julieta Jones, Prince Valiant, well, all the classic Americans, Ben Ball, even Alex Raymond was, anyway, that kind of stuff. But I never read any Superman, any Batman, or any of those comics.
Yeah, that's interesting because whenever you hear, say, an interview with Brian Bolland or Dave Gibbons, they always talk about how their sort of career started when they started buying DC comics, and it was always their dream to go over to DC and work on superheroes.
Yeah, I suppose also that have an influence in their style. They work with the brush and very clean lines, and but if you look my artwork, it's not exactly the one to fit for superhero.
And so, was it reading kind of Prince Valiant and those sort of adventure comics that made you decide that comics was something you actually wanted to do?
No, until I was 20 years old, I don't even know you can be able to live drawing comics. I have no idea at all. But I always liked it very much to draw and to read. And then I was doing the military service in Zaragoza when I met another artist who was doing Christmas. And he told me, well, if you want to be an artist, you can go to Barcelona. Now it's like a boom. So when I finished the military service, I just go to Barcelona and give some proofs. I started in the top editorial, and then I was picked up by the lowest one,
In terms of your big break, can you tell us a bit about how you got actually published for the first time?
No, as I said before, I go to Barcelona, and then I started with the big name, with the big editorials and the big agents. Naturally, they say, oh, no. And then, as I say, it was the bottom one, the real bottom one. And they asked me for a Western that they do. It was 24 pages with the script, with lettering and artwork. And I think 24 pages, they pay me something like £1, no, 50p or something like this.
50p? That's not very much, is it?
No, but in those times it was the 69, 70, yes. But it was something, someone was interested in my work. Once in there, I can only go up because I was really at the bottom. I always been also very optimistic in the sense that if I found a stone in my way, you can consider a big stone that you can do nothing at all, or you can go around the stone or jump on top of the stone. So typical glass half empty or half full. I always see the glass half full.
Was that a studio environment? Were you working in with everybody else in those days?
No, well, the only thing is we meet, and especially once because I was in Barcelona, and then in the 72 I go to England.
We were developing Battle Picture Weekly. This would be back in 75, I think, looking for the best artists we could find. We'd spotted this one fellow in D.C. Thompson's comics on a couple of stories, Chained to His Sword and Strongbow. Good characterization, really nice story flow, a natural storyteller. But we'd no way of knowing who he was because Thompson's didn't credit their creators. So every agent that came into the office, we'd show him the comic and say, "Do you know this artist?" Finally, one of them coughed up. His name was Carlos Ezquerra.
And in the 74, I started working, I think, for Battle and so on. And what happened is that when being there, as you bring the artwork to the editorial, you tend to meet there to some other people. So that is the way I meet John Wagner, Pat Mills, Dave Gibbons, Brian Boland, Matt McMahon, so Kevin O'Neill. So you were there, and it was like a club sometimes, and it was very nice. Then later, and especially with the internet, all that kind of thing has been lost.
So there was quite a big scene then, wasn't there? Sort of centered around the conventions as well.
Yes, I never go too much to conventions. Also in those days, I don't think it was too many conventions. It was a lot of fanzines. And in many of those fanzines, well, it was 74, something like this. Normally I was ignored totally because I was a bloody foreigner. Normally for those fanzines, the only people who existed was Brian, it was Dave Gibbons, it was Kevin O'Neill.
And were there many Spanish artists who? Because I know there were quite a few Spanish artists working on British comics.
Yes.
Were you one of the only ones who actually came over to live in the UK?
I think so. I was, at least in that time, I never knew any other one. But even before me, it's because most of the Spanish artists, they were working with agents. So they can work in Spain, and then the agents send the artwork to England. And even they don't even know, cannot even speak English, and because the agents give the scripts already translated to them. But it was a lot of Spanish people working especially for this Battle library, the little comics, and where it was working big names. It was Alberto Breccia, it was Hugo Pratt, Victor de la Fuente in Spain. It was a lot of big names working for that comic.
Remember, I come from Spain, but it was Franco in Spain. So I was very much used to deal with the prohibitions and also very strong religious sentiment sometimes. And so for me, it was nothing special. Even so, for me, England was an open paradise, in comparison with Spain.
The first story we gave Carlos was called Rat Pack. It was a Dirty Dozen clone. It was the longest story in the comic, and we thought pretty much central to its success. When we got the artwork back, we knew we'd chosen the right man. The characterization was brilliant. The action scenes extremely exciting. The flow great. It was, although we didn't know it then, the beginning of a long, fruitful and rather wonderful association.
You're often associated with 2000 AD, obviously Judge Dredd, Strontium Dog,
all of which are science fiction.
When did that sort of come into your art? Was that just the market changed with Star Wars, or were you interested in science fiction beforehand?
I remember I do one or two stories before I came to England, science fiction, for one of these very low editorials, very little editorials. But normally up to then, I like science fiction, but I was not exactly over interested in doing that. Normally also I am more interested in the characters more than in the style. I don't mind if it's a pirate story, a western, a war story, but I am more interested in how the characters move and how they react.
So I know a lot of 2000 AD fans will have heard you talk about the creation of the iconic Judge Dredd. But for those people who haven't heard the story, can you just tell us briefly how it all came about?
Dredd became, well, the first idea they gave me about Dredd was a long policeman, just a policeman, but dressed in black with a bike. And in New York, say the year 2000 or 1999, something like this. Well, I took it and then I started thinking, okay, if he's fighting against the baddies, he has to be protected. So I put 2 shoulder pads, elbows, and the knees. And then I said, well, if he has to be recognized in a world full of crimes, he has to be recognized. So one of the shoulders, it was an eagle, because also with an eagle, it's an American symbol, and also it's a fascist symbol, using since the Roman time. Then the seal, I take the seal out of the Spanish coins of 5 pesetas or 25 pesetas in the bag. So I just make out of there. And the bike also, I make a big, really bike, very impressive. Also, if he was sitting like he was sitting in a chopper, to draw the gun is not easy from the waist. So I put the gun on the leg. That it was far more easy, and especially if it's the kind of like a chopper, as I say. And with the sitting, I remember they told me, well, it was a big city growing like very, very fast. And in Spain, we say, well, it's growing like mushrooms. So I make all the buildings, not with a phallic shape, but with a mushroom shape, Well, I don't know, I just let my imagination to fly. John was not very happy with it, but I think Pat Mills was enthusiastic about it, and they changed the scripts. That's it, the way I created Judge Dredd.
But then famously, you didn't work on Judge Dredd pretty much until the Apocalypse War.
No, I made some short stories, but the thing is, I made one story, and I was thinking, okay, the first story will be mine. That is the one you can say I can demonstrate is mine, the series, And then I don't mind about who do that after. But then for me, it was a big surprise that the first story I saw printed, it was the one by Mick McMahon. So, I feel so angry that I say I was never going to work anymore with 2018. And not only that, but also even some of the figures that was in that story, they were just like, maybe not cut and fixed, but very similar. It was just taking a copy of mine. So, I feel very, very angry about that. For me, it was a bit of frustration that the first story was not printed, it was not mine. Then he told me after that the first story was a censorship, as it was considered too violent for that times. But they don't tell me that from the first moment. I only learned all these things once they were printed.
Well, those were a very funny times in England. He was Mrs. Thatcher, he was Mrs. Mary Whitehouse. Even the first story I made, Dredd, the one that established the clothes, the Mega City one, the bike, everything, they don't publish because it was considered too violent. And today, for today's standards, it's nothing, absolutely nothing. But as I say, there were some those times they think that kids, they were, I don't know, yes, very, very innocent souls.
What's the creative process like for you on a project? So, for example, where does it start? Do you start by, if you're doing a story, do you input ideas, discuss with the writer, and then you sort of build the story out of that? Or do you kind of usually have the script come in fully formed and then you start working from that?
Yeah, normally come the script, and I say with the writers, as I've been working so many years with them, with John Wagner, Alan Grant, Garth Ennis, I don't discuss very much the story. They give me the script, I read it, and then all the visuals are mine. It's me the one who decide many of the times what do I how they look things. The ambience, the characters, clothes, everything. And also, if it's necessary, the speed of the story, I can control that too. And I never have any complaint from John or from Garth or anyone at all. So it's about the creation of when I read the story for first time with new characters. In the moment I read the story, it's like if I am looking a film into my head. So I can see quite well how the character looks in the way that they tell me how he moves, what is his personality, and after that I try to reflect that on his face and movements and clothes if it's necessary. And also I try when I do a character to be easily identifiable, even if he changed clothes. You know, the only one that cannot be identifiable if he changed clothes is Dredd. Yeah, you can identify him. But because that practically is the uniform, the most important thing of him. But with the Strontium Dog, he has been changed clothes, he has been shaved his hair, everything, and you still can recognize it's him. Yeah, not only that, but also if you see Just a Pilgrim or any other other characters, you know, Darren Red, Bloody Mary. They are very easily recognizable.
And do you so when you read the script, do you see it like a film in your head? Then do you visualize the whole thing kind of playing, and then you pick scenes out?
Yes, exactly. And that is the reason that I always well, they know already, but I always ask the writers to be very much a bit like a telegram, you know, very short descriptions. Because if they are long descriptions, I get confused in my head. So I cannot concentrate on what is really happening.
And I guess the short description gives you some sense where you can go with your artwork, because if there's a really long-winded description, you have to try and copy it out almost exactly, whereas there's quite a short description. It gives you a bit more creative freedom, I guess.
Yes, well, not only that, but normally it's because even if it's a long description, I am quite impatient, so I don't read all the description. The writer, he can imagine one thing, and then when it comes to draw on paper, that is another totally different thing. So, and that is my option. You know, it's not the writer option; it's mine. Mm-hmm. So, normally, as I said, with the writers I always work, they know that, and we can penetrate very much indeed. You know, with John Wagner, I've been working for almost 40 years, so we are like an old married couple. And with Garth, it's how long? Maybe 20, 25 years, something like this. So it's quite a long time.
Yeah, you seem to have a sort of an established sort of stable of writers that you work with now. Alan Grant, John Wagner, Garth Ennis, and now I think Gordon Rennie has been kind of the most recent one that you've been working with. Yes,
I've been working, with Gordon Rennie doing Coburn. That it was like a copy from Major Easy. And then recently I've been doing a Dredd story with Gordon Rennie that it will appear sometime in the magazine. There is a Dredd story and then a character who could be remembered a little bit as El Mestizo. Has nothing to do with that, you know?
No. Then that one's coming soon, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know. I suppose so. In the moment I send the work, I don't know. I never know exactly when it's going to be printed. I only knew that when I read the comic.
When you're actually creating a new page and you've got the script,
do you do prelims or sketches or something before you actually draw the actual page?
Yes, it's because I am what you can say I am a dirty artist. So if I start sketching on the page, it can be a nightmare because I make 50 lines. Instead of doing one line, I can make 50 lines. And then when I am inking is when I really choose one of those lines. Now I am working with a very thin kind of paper that I put in top of that and drawing more clearly.
And have you always worked like that? Did you ever use a light box or anything like that before? Or has it always been you would sketch and then...
No, because the paper is a special paper, special for markers, and that is a very thin paper. So you can, if I make the sketch with a marker, I can put the paper in top of it, and I can see exactly more or less where the lines are. And as I said, normally also the roughs are not the finished artwork. Can say I can be changing at the moment. I am doing in integral paper. It can be changed totally.
Yeah, especially on computer because you use a.
Yeah, well, I do in paper and then I scan the computer and the color I do in the computer. Now I started doing the coloring with the computer in 1986. I think I was maybe the first artist in England to start coloring with computer.
Yeah, I remember when you switched to computer, there was a cry of shock, wasn't there?
Yes, it was also a lot of very crazy artwork, but I was enjoying it. I was just practicing with it. I was like playing.
Yeah, I remember people couldn't understand why any artist would want to use a computer. They were sort of obsessed with the age of fully painted and sort of inked artwork. But now almost every artist is a computer artist.
Yes, and well, for me, even in the speed, in the time I use for painting by hand, the speed is practically almost the same as the one I use with the computer. But the computer is a bit more fun and it's cleaner. I don't have to have all these kind of colors on top of my table. And as I say, as I am not a very clean artist, I am a dirty one.
And so what materials, so apart from the computer now and markers, do you have any sort of, and your very thin paper, do you have any specific pens or anything have you ever used a brush?
Yes, but no, I got one of these, the Pentel is a brush.
The brush pen.
A brush, yes. But in the old times, when I use a brush, the first thing I always do was to cut the point and make it flat, Mm-hmm. I remember Dave Gibbons was horrified. Every time I say I do that, But I never been a brush artist. I am more like a pen one. It's my artwork is too sketchy to be used the brush.
I suppose I must have known Carlos for over 40 years. I remember him when he lived down in Croydon with his wife Conchita, and Brian Bolland and I went to visit him and had some really lovely Spanish food. Carlos's English wasn't quite so good then, and the thing I really remember is him complaining about the income tax that he had to pay, which I think is what led him to relocate to Andorra, where I understand the tax arrangements are much more beneficial. We both worked for the same agent, Barden Press Features, and we worked on things like Power Man, which was a comic that we did for the Nigerian market. But obviously Carlos is best known for his work on 2000 AD, and particularly the co-creation of Judge Dredd. I think Carlos brought a real contemporary European feeling to 2000 AD. His work used to remind me very much of Enki Bilal and even Mobius. But Carlos's thing was to draw quite informally, always to tell the story, always to bring as much excitement and humour to it as he could, and to actually make it look very simple. But of course, as anybody who draws or tries to create himself knows, to make it look simple is the hardest thing of all. But I remember Carlos fondly. He was a great artist and a really nice guy.
With regards to sort of the language of comic storytelling and placing perspective in comics, was that something that you just sort of learned naturally, or did you get any training from anybody else in that?
No, I learned how to draw comics first watching films. For example, for characters, I watch a lot of John Ford and many of the films. I really like it. So that it told me how to tell a story. And also for many, many years, my bedtable book was The Confessions of a Film Director by Eisenstein, the Russian director. I remember he was telling many, many times how he do the Potemkin, the battleship Potemkin, Ivan the Terrible, and that kind of films. And he was one of my teachers. And also I learned a lot of how to draw comics with writers, for example, also with Charles Dickens. He was one of my masters, just to teach me how to tell a story. If you read Dickens, he is very much a very cinematographic writer, in the sense that, for example, he can describe an scene on the table. It was a bucket of fruit. Then it was a woman knitting or something like this. And then it was in the chimney, the fire was, so you can imagine foreground, the table, middle ground, the woman knitting or whatever it is. And then the background is a big chimney with cauldron boiling. That is how I learned how to draw comics.
After that, you moved over to Star-Lord to create Strontium Dog.
I moved to Battle Magazine, where I was doing Major Easy, and then also we tried to create a couple of new characters. One is Comrade Bronsky, that I don't think he was very successful, and also El Mestizo. El Mestizo was the wrong comic on the wrong magazine and on the wrong time. But I like it also, that one. And then I think 1 year later, they created the Star-Lord, and John Wagner called me to do a series there. And is where it appeared, Strontium Dog.
And those other two were with Alan Hebden, weren't they?
Yes, the other ones, they were with Alan Hebden.
And then Strontium Dog got moved back into 2000 AD, so you ended up back at 2000 AD anyway.
Yes, and well, even before that, I think I made 1 or 2 single episodes for Just Dread. Anyway, it was morning, so no problem.
You'd calmed down by then.
You're supposed to be a professional too. So, I said, also I said, okay, even so, the character is mine, so I can do whatever I want. Yeah, I never have any problems, with my characters.
When they create that Star-Lord, John Wagner called me to do the Strontium Dog story. And my first idea with the Strontium Dog was to put down Dread in popularity. I said, no, it's mine, but I'm going to put it down. Well, I was not successful. Sometimes I was successful. Strontium Dog passed over in top to Just Dread. But normally Strontium Dog was always more second to Dread than anything else. It was very interesting because Strontium Dog is a little bit like a space opera western. Everything is in small cities, dust, the kind of looking for the rewards and chasing criminals. And the good thing is that all that is done by outcast people. Is all the mutants that they are hating the earth, so they are used for that kind of thing. With Dread, the face don't have any importance at all. It was the helmet who was important. With the Strontium Dog, it was the face. So even I tried to put a very special kind of hair that is a curly hair, black curly hair, that normally is not used very much in the comics. And the nose is broken. And even in the face, you can notice a little bit of sadness in the look. And I think it came out quite well. I was quite happy, with the final. And well, even so, it's almost as old as Dread. So it's been a successful character too. They told me they were thinking in killing it, and I say no. I was not happy with that. And they thought, well, if we kill the character, no other artist will pick it up and make a mess out of it. And I always consider that commercially stupid and crazy, in the sense that if we don't own the copyright of Johnny Alpha or Judge Dredd, because in the 70s it was the company who kept the copyright, so we cannot do anything at all. And with our successful character, even if we kill it, the company can put up all over again and do whatever they wanted. So I always consider it was better if we carry on doing it as long as it was possible. They don't take too much notice of what I was saying, so I say, I don't want to know anything. For me, that story or that part of Johnny Alpha do not exist.
And then there was famously Bad Company as well that you created with John and Alan, that went over to Peter Milligan.
Yes, they asked me about that, so I made the characters, and then they gave it to Peter Milligan. I don't know why. Maybe I was doing something else, or maybe they don't like it. It was nothing to do with what I did.
I quite like Fiends of the Eastern Front. You worked on that with Jerry Finley-Day, didn't you? It's quite different to a lot of the stuff that's in 2000 AD, I guess primarily because it's not actually really science fiction.
I suppose they gave that to me because I was very much a specialist in bracket of war stories. Well, these things just come, it was the editor who gave me that. I read it, I like it, so I carry on doing it. And it's different, for example, what happened with the stainless steel rod that I made with Kevin Gosnell. That was, we were talking a lot about the series, and beforehand, it was a lot of talking between Kevin Gosnell and myself about what to do and what not to do. And it came out also very nice series. I think it was the stainless steel rod series.
And the other character of yours I really like, which we've touched on a few times, is Coburn, Cursed Earth Coburn. He's the absolute opposite to Dredd, isn't he? He's completely laid back. He upholds the law in a different style completely. And was that fun to do, to kind of do almost the anti-Dredd?
Yes, I always really love to do anti-heroes, Mainly most of my characters, they are really anti-heroes. All but Dredd. That is the only really law-abiding character. But the rest of them, even from the first story that I was doing for Battle, that it was Rat Pack, it was a story based on the Dirty Dozen. From that time onwards, all my characters has been anti-heroes, all of them.
2000 needed to get you working on some new characters, I think. What was the last one you created? Was it, apart from villains and antagonists, was Coburn sort of the last big character you created?
I don't know. I always consider myself that I've been underused, but also because the way it is work in the comic industry, not in the comic industry, many of the editorials is that they don't pay for the creation of characters, so that doesn't motivate you to do new characters, because in the end, the one who has the most benefit is the editorial, is not the artist.
You should have a list of them all. When you create them, you should pin them up on the wall. You could have the whole wall full of all of the characters you've created.
Yes, it will be I need quite a big wall, because he's not only the main character, but also he's the secondary. For example, in Strontium Dog, it was Miriam Face, McNulty, Darren Red, and, Torso. Anyway, it's a lot of secondary characters that has their own personality and their own character.
How do you feel about other creators working on the characters that you've created? I mean, in some cases, they as you say, have taken it so far away from the sort of original character that they basically created something else. With Darren Red, and again with Strontium Dogs, they created a whole host of other characters and just kind of integrated Midden Face and Darren Red into that story.
Yeah, well, I don't mind. It's something that I created, and I don't mind what they do. well, maybe with the Strontium Dog is a little bit different because it's a character that I love very much. And the only thing is, some of these characters, if they change a lot of clothes, so the special character of personality of these characters is on the face. The problem is that when you change from one artist to another one, you tend to change the character. It's not the same Strontium Dog drawn by me, for example, as drawn by any other people, unless they put the curly hair and the eyes. But physically, they don't have too much in common. As for example, with Judge Dredd, as is the uniform, and it's very peculiar uniform, well, more or less, they do their own versions. But in the end, it's always the same. You know, the eagle in one side, the shoulder pad on the other. It can be done by anyone. And I don't mind in the sense that every artist who come, they put a little bit of their own personality on it. So sometimes many of the ideas or new ideas, they could come after.
When I saw it the first time, I feel, I say, well, that is Dredd. The problem is that after 10 minutes, he take the helmet. After 12 minutes, he take the uniform. And then after 30 minutes, he just go to prison. So, where is Dredd? It disappeared totally. It's like if in a Superman film, he was all the film dressed like Clark Kent. Even it was a little things, as for example, in one occasion, Sylvester Stallone half smiled to her. Jesus Christ, I cannot stand that. The figure of Dredd has been changing over the years, and it's all depends about the fashion. Originally, he was skinny because he was the kind of Clint Eastwood or this kind of artist. They were the ones in fashion. Then it came out the fashion of Schwarzenegger, the big, and then it was Simon Bisley, Dredd, and so on. And now it's a little bit like a mixture, you know, it's not as big as that, and it's not as thin as originally. So it's adapting to the, but Dredd is there, it's the icon. You see him very slim, very strong, and so on, but if you see the silhouette, you always know that is Dredd.
And you've worked on a lot of Judge Dredd and Strontium Dog stories. Do you have any particular favourites of the stories that you've worked on?
My favorite has always been Strontium Dog, in the sense that it's far more complex character than Judge Dredd. With Strontium Dog, almost all the stories are favorites of mine, and with Judge Dredd, well, many of the normally has to be a long saga. My favorite, you know, it's from Apocalypse War to Necropolis, or even the latest ones like Origins. That it was the last big story I made, you know, for that.
Yeah. And with if we go back to the pit, what was the reason you didn't draw the whole of the pit?
No idea. I don't know, that was an editorial decision. So it's, well, maybe because it was publishing at the same time in 2008 and in the magazine. And then they put both together, you know, but...
right, okay.
Yeah, I think it was something like this. Then I was doing the one in the 2008, and some other artists, they were doing the ones in the magazine.
Because it ended up all in 2000 AD, but it was quite jarring the way it would jump to a different artist. It was quite hard to follow.
That one, it was, you can see, and originally I don't even know it was going to be done in the magazine. So I tried to do some characters, pretty strong characters, like the rock judge that he was this guy's, or well, several of those characters, they were quite well drawn, you know, quite well, very well defined, their personality.
Yeah, and in fact, some of them have gone on to have their own series, like DeMarco is now still running in the magazine, and Guthrie, I think, was continued by Gordon Rennie for quite a long time.
So they were quite strong characters, but it's because I thought all the story was going to be mine, but anyway.
And then there have been other series as well. I'm a big fan of The Burning Man a series that only was created for one episode and then was never continued. But have there been any other series that you've either worked on that have never actually come to fruition and actually become full series, or that you've started and have been cancelled that you would have liked to see sort of progress?
No, it's because in the end, maybe we do a pilot episode or something like this, and then in the end, never come out. One, it was about Detective Private Eye. I don't remember now the name, but I did, I don't know, a couple of pages and the main character, and that was very, very good indeed. But I don't know why it never come out.
Our last story together was called Spectre. It was based on a character Carlos drew maybe 30 years ago that we could never find a satisfactory story to. Finally we did, and although, to be honest, both of us were finding the old spark a wee bit harder to conjure up, we were getting there. Sadly, it's never to be finished now, but thanks to Rebellion, who will be putting it all in a special later this year, you'll be able to see everything that Carlos had done on it.
Do you like to experiment, Carlos? Do you like to try different techniques, or do you just stick with kind of what you know?
No, I like to use different techniques. You know, I don't mind. I've been using almost everything. You know, chalk, inks, even oil. But then in the end, I tend to do the one that is faster for me, you know. But normally I try to change my style from time to time. If I see new things from another artist or new ideas.
Is the process different working for DC as opposed to working for UK companies?
From the first time I started working for, I remember it was DC Comics, the usual thing, it was to send first the pencils. They look at it and they change whatever it is and send back to the artist. And from the first moment I say, we're not going to do that. You know, I finish totally, and if they don't like something, I change. But I refuse to send first my pencils and then receive it back and all that kind of things. So I always have exactly the same, my technique is exactly the same for one comic or for another.
Yeah, that's great. It's great that they gave you the kind of the freedom to be able to do that.
Well, for me, it's always been very, very important to have freedom. This is the reason I never wanted to change from 2000 AD. I always feel very, very comfortable in 2000 AD. I think maybe I am the only artist who haven't moved to the States. The all people who were in there, Brian Boland, Dave Gibbons, everybody has been just going to the States, but I never been interested in that. Because at least in 2000 AD, I feel very, very comfortable, you know, so it's, I have total freedom, and normally the people there is very nice people, and this is the one that is in comics. So I never have the necessity to move to the States. Plus, also, maybe you can say that I never liked the superhero stuff. Maybe because when I was a child, here in Spain, I never read that. So maybe it's because of that, but I never liked it. I only drew one Batman, one time, along with John Wagner. I don't think he don't like the superhero very much, but this was because one dinner in London, we were challenged by Archie Goodwin about doing when he was editor in DC Comics, doing a Batman story. It was printed something like 8 or 10 years after. So maybe it was not very good when it was just sleeping inside a drawer, you know.
Yeah, and you also did a Spider-Man as well, didn't you? A Spider-Man image once.
Spider-Man was only an image in the series, an image that someone asked me because it was the anniversary of Spider-Man, so I don't mind that. Also, I've been drawing the characters with Garth Ennis in the series of Kelvin, the Magnificent Kevin.
Yeah.
Yes, these superheroes.
And the boys as well. But
yes, and the boys, yes. But in the boys, yeah, well, it appeared one or two superheroes.
I first encountered Carlos' work on Dread, of course. A couple of memorable early episodes, Call Me Kenneth included. Then a long break while he was doing Strontium Dog, and then back for The Apocalypse War, which is probably my all-time favorite Carlos illustrated story. Dread at his most lethal, Mega City on the ropes. Carlos doesn't balk at any of this. Nothing really stopped him. He could draw anything, take anything in his stride. I can't imagine a better example of the man at his very best. It was always a treat working with Carlos. He was one of my all-time favorites. It was a pleasant surprise to find out that he wanted to work with me at all. I'd loved his work as a kid, and to find that he, now that I was writing comics, wanted to collaborate with me was very satisfying indeed. We did a lot of great stuff together. Let's see if I can remember a couple of my favorites. I worked out recently that we did, 1,000, maybe 1,500 pages together, possibly more. A lot of material. Bloody Mary, of course, Just a Pilgrim. My favorites would probably be the war stories that he drew for me. Most obviously the Tankies and Condors, where he got to draw a story about really the most important moment in his own country's 20th century history, the Spanish Civil War. Condors was one where I thought he really did pull out all the stops. But my all-time favorite story we did together would be Adventures in the Rifle Brigade, where his talent for caricature and action and insanity and comedy, it was perfect. I couldn't have asked for better. Remembering Carlos now, I do still find it a little bit hard to accept that he's gone. A talent of his stature, a lovely bloke, an artist whose work meant so much to me, both growing up and when we were working together. There was really nobody quite like him. It's hard to imagine that we won't see any of his artwork again. There won't be any more of those iconic shots of Dread or Johnny Alpha. He really was something special. Cheers, Carlos. You were, as I often said, you were mighty.
Carlos Ezquerra, an artist who was so unique. He really was. There was no one whose work was anything like his. There was never any feeling that he was copying anyone, or that anyone even had an influence on him. It was all him, his work. Because when I started in comics, he, for some reason, didn't want to draw Judge Dredd, so I got that job and was asked to draw like Carlos. And it is impossible, because everything I thought I knew, well, not that it was very much at the time, but everything I thought I knew about comics or drawing didn't apply to him at all. He just was so, his style was so pure that it was unfathomable. I mean, I can understand it much better now because I've been working for 40 years. And actually, if someone asked me now to try and draw like him, I'd refuse, because it just is impossible. A great artist.
Hi there. There's a scene in an early Dredd story where Dredd says, "Who understands art? At least it keeps the citizens happy." Carlos went far beyond that. His art thrilled and inspired all who had the good fortune to experience it. This co-creation with Alan Hebden is a fine example of his prodigious talent. Farewell, Carlos.
I wanted to pay tribute to Carlos, and particularly for his amazing work on Third World War. This was a political thriller set in South America, and so Carlos was able to really draw on his intimate knowledge of Latin culture. And so I started thinking about, the anecdotes and conversations we might have had about Third World War. And to my amazement, I couldn't think of any. And there's an important reason for this. Because Carlos always just got on with it. that was Carlos. Now, normally with an artist, there's endless phone conversations, endless sketches, endless toing and froing. But this was the remarkable thing about Carlos, is that he got the story instantly. He got it straight away. His designs of the principal characters were spot on. They were very, very cool. Paul, Eve, Ivan, Trisha, and so on. And there was nothing to discuss. And so that's why, my mind is a little bit of a blank, because everything worked. And so there was no need for the kind of conversations that might have applied on other stories. And, this worked on the scripts as well, because he would always say to me, no, don't write any, long descriptions. I want to get the feeling of the characters. I want to get the flow of it. So, it'd be more like a movie script, very short, so he could really flow through. And I think it's true for all his work. Every single time, whether it was Judge Dredd, Rat Pack, whatever, Carlos always got it first time around. And that's pretty unique amongst comic artists. He's an amazing professional, and I miss him greatly.
2008 have the best fans in the world, I think. I love them, maybe 3 years ago they found I got lung cancer, and the fans' way of treat me, it was out of this world. It was fantastic. And that was the top.
You still got the glass half full attitude there, I see.
If you want to survive, has to be in that way, Once, or you laugh at life, or life will laugh at you. So I prefer to laugh at life,